Hey guys, so today's episode I've got an absolutely fantastic episode with a guy called Trevor from Cut Lunch Adventures. Now, I've known Trevor for a few years and I first met him at a gym I used to work at where I first got exposed to trekkers and mountaineers in a professional sense. Now, I was working there and coaching there, Trevor was training there, and we got to know each other a little bit. And Trevor's got a really fantastic story in the sense that he started trekking a few years ago and it's gone from something that he's enjoyed to a really, really lifelong passion. And him and his partner Emma have really put into the sort of focus of their lives to complete some really amazing adventures. I wanted to get Trevor on the show because he's got a very, very unique perspective when it comes to training, because he's been exposed to quite a few different training philosophies and preparing for different treks. So I wanted to pick his brains a little bit about that, and it's turned into a really, really good episode. There's some great practical tips for people who are aspiring to do some altitude trekking, and there's some really, really solid information around physical preparation for these adventures, and mainly the difference between a strength and conditioning program, which I'm so fond of, and just general training and preparation. So let's get into it, guys. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. So welcome, Trev. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Ron.
To start with, could you just tell us a little bit, for the listeners here, a little bit about yourself, how you got started in the trekking world, and what's a little bit about your journey since then?
Sure. So, look, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I think one of the things that was a natural progression from sort of being active and out there and sort of fitness was to get into trekking. And, from a very young age, that started from our boyhood and my partner Emma was also involved. So, we were always encouraged to go out and explore the world. So from travelling, then it was easy to transgress or transition, I should say, into trekking. And I think more than trekking, it's all also about trekking at altitude. And that's one of the things that we believe in. That all came about for me, for example, was in Borneo, going up to Mount Kinabalu at just over 4,000 metres. And that got me interested from the fact that, I've never been physically challenged like this in my life. There's got to be more to it. And sure enough, there's lots of mountains around the world that challenge you from an altitude point of view.
Yeah, fantastic. To be honest, I've known you for a while. I didn't even know where it all started. So start off in Borneo. So after Borneo, what were the next steps from there?
Well, I did a few New Zealand treks over there. Obviously not at altitude, but still some challenging treks, the Root Burn and Milford Sound, Milford Track and that type of thing. And then 2013 rocked around and it came about that there was a trek going to Everest Basecamp around the 60th anniversary of when Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary summited Everest back in 1953, if my maths are correct. And so that was okay, well, why not join the crew? So there was a bunch of Aussies and Kiwis and a mix of other people on that trek, and that obviously got us up to Everest Basecamp around 5,300 metres and all the challenges therein. And I guess you can safely say from that point on we were hooked and have been back to Nepal just about every year since then.
Yeah, fantastic. And then, so I know a little bit about Cut Lunch Adventures. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we had the thoughts of, and we sort of crystallised a couple of years ago, was to start documenting our travels and treks, so to speak. So we formed a website, a blog site called cutlunchaventures.com. The main Cut Lunch Adventures is an interesting name because, being from country Western Australia, we used to have a saying that how far away is that? We used to say cut lunch in a water bag. Cut lunch equating to a sandwich and a water bag equating to a canvas water bag that you used to hook onto the front of your car, and as you used to drive along, you used to cool down the water. As cut lunch in the water bag was too long, we shortened it to Cut Lunch Adventures. But on that side is, we've documented all our treks, all our travels, all of it's original. So it's all our first-hand, what we've learnt, what we probably should have known better, and some of the stuff you don't get on Google if you research it either.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I love the stuff that you got up there, and it is really, really helpful for people going up to, particularly in those first adventures they do, and just that practical advice, which, as you said, it's really just hard to find through Google and everything. So, and I love that story. I'd never heard it before. So there we go.
Yeah, and I think today, it's we sort of evolved it too, and today it's around, having, how do you go about, starting an adventure project? You think about it for a while, you prepare, you go and do it, and then getting back, you reflect. And reflect could mean that, gee, I'd never want to do that again. So the other point is, hey, what's next? Now I want to do this. I'm hooked. What's my next mountain, or what's my next trek? So it means different things to every people, but through that think, prepare, go and reflect, we think we've got it down. And if you go to our website, anybody can go there and they can click on any of those items, and there's a whole information behind that. So, and I guess that comes back to your philosophy too about preparing all for your adventure, and there's more to it than just rocking up to a gym and doing a half-hour session.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's the perfect leader into what we're going to dig into now. So the training side of things. So that's what everyone's here for, to listen to. So I know that personally that you've been in a bit of a unique position in the trekking world, in that you've experienced firsthand a few different philosophies around training for these expeditions. So in my experience, most people tend to stick to one thing. They do it for years and years, and they might work. If it works for them, they just stick with it. But you've tried and tasted a few different things in the spectrum. So would you mind running us through how you first started training for these adventures, or if you even did train for these adventures initially, and then how that's evolved over time?
Yeah, we did train. So, but like most people, you train not knowing what you're training for. So that started off by doing a boot camp in Sydney, running around the hills of Sydney and doing some long training runs, and maybe even doing a city to surf, right? So, we did it trying to keep fit, but obviously keeping fit also helped us in some of our treks. And Everest Basecamp's a classic point where it's not hard. The altitude is the one that gets you, but it's not a hard trek. But anyone with general fitness and good health would be able to do that. However, as time evolves, the boot camp got wound up, and we went, okay, so what's next? So we came across a gym in Sydney here you'd be familiar with. And a lot of that training was great, and it revolved around high-intensity training, going flat out for 30, 45 minutes. Had an altitude room, so that was unique in itself. Not to say the altitude room prepares you or acclimatises you, it just gives you an upper hand in terms of your fitness. And however, that really wasn't the answer for us. And as you say, for different people, for different things that might suit. One of the things we discovered that it's the core that's the key. It's your core. So if you don't get your core right from a strength point of view, then at the end of the day, everything will just fall around you, and you'll find that you'll end up with sore knees, or your ankles won't support you, or your whole body just collapses. So we found a gym on the Northern Beaches called Joe's Basecamp. And Joe's philosophy is all around the core, strength and conditioning, to have a purpose while you're training, and they're named for that. And they'll set up a program that specifically is tailored to you. And more importantly, I guess from that call to go to Joe's Basecamp, we ended up becoming their tracking ambassadors for our particular area. So I think that was quite exciting. And we've never been an ambassador for a particular organisation, so that was nice. So from our strength and conditioning programs, we've been able to now prove ultimately that, Makalu Advanced Base Camp was a classic, which is we just come back from. That was a classic one in terms of toughness, really hard yakka, going over a glacial moraine field with no trail. So that, required a lot of rock hopping. So, we wouldn't have been, I don't think anyway, we wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't have got our core strength right.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, I know Joe's does some absolutely amazing things like in the adventure world, and they've been going for quite a while. So I'd love to dig into this a little bit more. Like, what were the sort of types of things you've been doing to prepare for, say, Makalu you just came back from? What were the differences there which you thought really paid off in the strength conditioning program?
Oh, look, if we talk about your upper body, definitely the shoulders and your triceps, and just general, carrying a pack, maybe 8 or 9 kilograms, maybe more sometimes, and just having that physiology and makeup of your body to stand upright and to, especially stepping up and then stepping down, because I think we all underestimate the stepping down part. I think we all can handle the stepping up sometimes. I mean, it can be pretty hard going, but stepping down, I find, is the hard one on your knees. And, I'm glad to say I got through every minute of it. I didn't have a problem, and that was that. So, if you start up your upper body and then work through your quads and your other muscle groups, using weights or leg presses or whatever it is, that strengthens you over a door. And it's a tailored program, so basically not one program suits everyone. Emma, for example, is on a different program than me, but at the end of the day, you get an assessment similar to what you would do, and then you get you get put into that program. And it might mean extra weights, it might mean extra leg exercises, it might mean more upper body than lower body. Everyone's different. But I'm glad to say that it worked, because A, we didn't get sick, B, we got through the trek okay, and more importantly, never had any aches or pains in our body.
Hey, that's like the dream combo, isn't it? How good's that?
Yep. Dream combo, you're right.
So let's talk about Makalu for a bit then. So you've just come back from the advanced base camp there. We had a little bit chat about this before we got on the interview, but I'd love for you to share with everyone like a little bit about how that trip came about and what was different, and then what are some of the things you had to deal with while you're up there.
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things was we were in the Himalayas last year. We just completed an Annapurna Dhaulagiri circuit and came away a little bit, I wouldn't say disenchanted, but like that was interesting, but I'm not too sure how it went. But so we said, well, there's got to be more to it, because we love Nepal, we love the Himalayas, but there's got to be more to it. So we ended up forming what we call Project Base 8000, which is the aim is to trek to all the base camps of the 14 highest mountains in the world. So 7 of those are in Nepal, 5 are in Pakistan, and 2 are in Tibet, China. And so Makalu was on our list to do. So after doing Everest Base Camp twice, and by default you do Lhotse, because Lhotse shares the same base camp as Everest, which is a little bit silly, but that's how it works. We did Kanchenjunga late last year in the autumn, which is a very remote trek out to the east of Nepal. And so then next was Makalu Base Camp, which is about 19 kilometres southeast of Mount Everest, although you can't see it from there, but that is across the ridgeline, across the mountains. And one of the other objectives, what we wanted to do, was go with a mountaineering expedition. We haven't done that before, and that's a whole different ballgame in itself. And by a mountaineering expedition means exactly that. You're trekking in with mountaineers. You're actually going above, beyond where mountaineers go, not necessarily where trekkers go. And so, to experience life, in tents, the food they eat, just to talk to them, interact with them, find out how they tick, how they're preparing. And, some of these people are really, really hardcore. They've done other 8,000-metre mountains. And Makalu may have been the fourth or sixth one along the list. So, it was just exciting just to be amongst those type of people, just not on the people that were with us. So we had a very small expedition, but meeting, 20 or 30 other climbers all heading up there. So, yeah, that was fun. So, most of the time we were trekking in with them. Sometimes they might have acclimatised on another mountain, helicoptered across. But Makalu, again, was different from a point of view. We got to base camp, and normally that's where trekkers stop and turn around after a night or two. And that's around 4,800 metres. We were going another 1,000 metres above that. We were going to what we call advanced base camp, which was 5,700 metres. And let me tell you, that was the toughest thing both of us have ever done in our life. As I said before, and what I've led to before, it's over a boulder field, a moraine, glacier moraine, boulder field, no trail, basically hop from boulder to boulder to boulder. So some 10 hours later, altitude aside, we made it up to advanced base camp in the waiting arms of other people that were already there.
Yeah, fantastic. How good. All right, I want to dig into a few little bits and pieces. So you mentioned you learnt you met a few mountaineers up there and some different perspectives from people. So could you give us like one interesting fact or one interesting thing that you've learnt from one of the mountaineers up there?
Well, apart from they're all being interesting people,
yeah.
Their passion to go and climb that mountain. It's a difficult mountain in itself, as all other mountains are, but this one was very challenging, and their intense focus, their single-mindedness, you can see it by talking to them, and it's in their eyes, and you can actually tell very quickly, like you would, if you meet people, whether they're going to summit or not. It's just in there, just the way they talk to you and the way they describe it. And, maybe they've done other 8,000 metre mountains, maybe they haven't. But that's that sheer willpower, what they've done to train to get there, all those things leading up to it. And our mental toughness is a classic. You might have a 20-hour summit window or day to do. It could be longer, depending on the conditions and if anything goes wrong, So being able to do that and beyond your physical boundaries and being above 8,000 metres, which they don't call the death zone for nothing, even though you might have oxygen, it's still challenging. And just being able to talk to people and how they've done other mountains or what they're going to encompass on this mountain, that's quite incredible to be able to talk to those people.
Yeah, love it. And then you also mentioned, so there was quite a bit of rock hopping at on part of that trek. What do you think if someone was like coming onto a trek and they knew they had a lot of rock hopping coming up? What would you sort of recommend to them, or from your personal experience, which might help them in their preparation to get ready for that?
Yeah, look, balance is key. And I had trekking poles, and to be honest with you, they're a waste. On that particular hopping part was a waste of time. You basically have to balance yourself and step out to another rock and put your hands out, because a serious fall would probably be the end of the trek. So balance, focus, maintain your focus. I'm a firm believer in the here and now. Worry about what's in front of you today. Don't worry about yesterday, because yesterday was yesterday, and don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow may not even come if you can't get through today, right? So it was all being in that present moment, the here and now. So your balance, your the training that you did in your legs and your core posture. So putting all that together and concentrating, obviously, and just, as I said, just really focusing on that one particular boulder, and then the next boulder, and the next boulder. And before you know it, you look back, always look behind you, because some of the best views are behind you. You look where you've just come from and you go, wow, I've come that far in an hour or 2 hours or 10 hours in our case, but you actually have a sense of achievement by accomplishing what you're trying to set out to achieve.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Like stay the focus and don't concentrate on yesterday or tomorrow. I think you worded that really, really well, because I think a lot of people, their minds do get away from them in certain situations and they lose that focus, and opens up the potential for a lot of issues in the moment when they really should be concentrating as much as they should. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And then for altitude, so you got up pretty high on this trek. I'll ask you, what's your favorite foods while you're up at altitude?
Anything that you can digest. No, look, I think quite common, it's dal bhat. I mean, it's lentils and rice. That's a common food for the local Nepalis, especially the Sherpas. We were lucky being with an expedition. We had a variety of food. If I told you we had fresh salmon up at 5,700 metres, we were able to commandeer the odd helicopter here and there. So we actually ended up with better food than normal people. So, kiwi fruit and avocado on toast and bacon and eggs for breakfast. Very, very unusual. Very unusual, right? but normally it's dal bhat. But, look, take your favourite chocolates. Snickers, peanuts, peanut slabs, or Cadbury chocolate, or Pringles. It's interesting because what tastes good at sea level doesn't necessarily work at altitude, and what works at altitude doesn't necessarily work at sea level. And we've tried and tested various aspects, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I think the most important thing, like if I digress a bit from food and acclimatisation, it's drink lots of water, stay hydrated, but obviously keep your make sure you keep your appetite up and eat. Watch your general hygiene. Monitor yourself from a health. Everyone will get a headache, and to get a headache is natural. Take some Panadol or ibuprofen and let it settle down. And have some more water. So there are various strategies to adopt. I have another strategy which I don't necessarily endorse. I take iron tablets, believe it or not, just to get your red blood cell count up. So that works for me. It's worked for a couple of other people I know. So look, different people have different strategies, but by and large, it's about listening to your body and how it will react, because it will react differently to other people.
Yep, no, that's some really good advice there. So what's next in line? Where are you heading off next?
To complete our project, we've got a number of other mountains to do. So obviously, coming up is Tibet, China, with a couple of mountains there. and then that should complete or almost be halfway through our project. And then next year is the big one. Next year we've got a couple more to do in Nepal. Sorry, 3 more to do in Nepal, and five of those are also in Pakistan, which is the Karakoram Ranges, which forms part of the Himalayan chain. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. In the process, we're also raising money for the Australian Himalayan Foundation. So they do a lot of good work in the Himalayas around environment, health and education. So, with them, we're sort of very lucky that we have a charity on board to be able to contribute to and raise funds for. So it's going to be a very busy time. But again, I should also mention that we believe and understand that we'd be the first trekkers, i.e. non-mountaineers, by doing 14 of Basecamp's all the 8,000-metre mountains. No one, to our knowledge, has done all 14, or at least to our knowledge, some have tried. But one of the things that we've discovered through default or other means is that logistics is the big one. If you don't have the right support or company behind you, then logistically it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah, that's going to be such a great achievement when you guys tick that off. And it's not if, it's when, because 100% you're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the exciting thing for us is not to tick off a bucket list item. We want other people to follow in our footsteps. We want people to come with us. For example, on the Makalu one, we had a gentleman that came with us from the US who was actually on our Kanchenjunga trip, and another guy from New Zealand who said, look, I'm not too sure if I want to climb Makalu, but I wouldn't mind trekking in with you guys because this sounds exciting. So we've even had some climbers approach us to say, look, at the end of the day, I may not feel I want to climb an 8,000-metre mountain or another one, but hey, I'll be keen to come on board and trek with you. Well, when you get that sort of endorsement from a mountaineer or climber, then we must be on the right track somewhere.
Yeah, beautiful. That's great. I love that. So I know we've got a reasonable amount of listeners here who are sort of planning their first trek. So, they've either booked something in or they're just sort of aspiring to it one day soon. If you sort of thought back and you say, hey, all these years ago, I'm going to prepare for my first trek, what would be something that you would recommend to people in there, specifically around their training and preparation?
I think the number one would be mental toughness. Think through it, what you're going to encounter. If it's a camping trip, for example, have you ever camped in a tent before? If not, go out for a couple of nights, in the Blue Mountains or on some other place around Sydney, for example, if you're based in Sydney or wherever you are. Spend a couple of nights and check out, test your gear out. Go out when it's raining. Get some decent boots. So a lot of it's that. It's preparing yourself, your body, from a fitness point of view, your gear, getting the right gear, getting that into that mental mind frame about, what it's going to be like out there. Book a couple of overnight hikes if you want, and go and test all that out, the knowledge. Altitude's a whole different thing because I'm a firm believer you can't prepare for altitude. You have to experience it. The altitude gym is great, for example, if you've got one or access to one, but from a point of view of using that to acclimatise, it's not going to work. I can speak from experience. It helps you. You can increase up to 5,000 metres or whatever in the altitude room, and you can sort of test how you feel at that altitude. But it doesn't help you acclimatise, and that's one thing we've learned. But at the end of the day, I guess there's no one answer to lots of things. It's just about going about and just seeing and testing things out before you go on your big trek. So best to do that locally in your own region, where you're closer to home, and if something doesn't work out, at least you can phone a taxi or get an Uber, rather than find you're stuck halfway up a mountain and you go, oh shit, that's not working. I can't call an Uber. How am I going to get back? Maybe a helicopter's the answer, but you have to pay for that. So
yeah, expensive solution there.
Very expensive. Yeah, very expensive.
Oh, great! That's some really, really, really good advice, and I'm sure quite a few listeners are going to get some value out of that. So appreciate that. So finally, if people did want to learn a little bit more about Project Base 8000 or help out the cause a little bit, where can they find you? What can they do? Where should we point people to?
Yep. So based on that, so our cutlunchadventures.com is our main blogging website, and that's got a lot of stuff on how to prepare. For our particular project, projectbase8000.com. On both of those, Cut Lunch Adventures and Project Base 8000, we're very active on social media. through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we post a lot of our stuff up on there. Our handle is either Cut Lunch Adventures or Project Base 8000. So, there's a heck of a lot of information on there. We keep on adding it as we go. But more importantly, if anyone wants to ask any questions, feel free to reach out to us. As I said at the outset, that this isn't just about us. It's about inspiring other people to follow in our footsteps and enjoy what we've been doing. And if someone came to us tomorrow and said, "Hey, we want to go and tackle Kanchenjunga or Makalu rather than the Everest Base Camp because we've read your posts and we're really excited about what you guys are doing," fantastic. And that for us would be a good tick in the box because that's what we want people to do.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Trev. I really, really appreciate it. I think you've given some really, really great content for some people to digest here. And I'll put some links below in the show notes for everyone so they can find all the things you mentioned. But it's been fantastic having you on, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I think, one of the things that excites us is that there are people like you out there trying to do things differently and, encouraging people to look at training differently and their approach and just not the normal, rock up to a gym and do your half-hour aerobic session. So,
beautiful. I love it, mate. Well, all the best, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.
Thanks, Ryan. Pleasure.
You've been listening to the Training for Trekking podcast. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and review us in iTunes. So thanks for getting involved and we'll see you on the next one.